the presentation. We'll give her a couple more minutes before we kick off here. Coming in, we are going to jiggle the agenda a slight bit, but I am calling the Monday, May 6th meeting of the Park and Recreation Committee of the City of Wausau to order. We got a full house of eager members to tackle this agenda, and we're going to do so in 56 minutes or less, we promise. And we're going to open with public comment that may not necessarily, it's going to deal generally, I'm told, with Park and Rec issues, but perhaps not a specific item on this agenda, but we're going to be a little relaxed. Ms. Miller, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Judith Miller, 903 Kickbush Street, Wausau. First comment may be inappropriate, but too bad. Since we don't have a city council meeting this week, I just want all city council members to be aware of this. It has come to my attention on social media and other places that apparently city officials have stated that DNR test results, while not yet related to the city, are in, and that there's no reason to be concerned about any sort of contamination on the Waleco site. I spoke to Matt Thompson, the hydrogeologist, on this at the DNR last Thursday. There is not even a scope of work plan that has been approved, meaning there's no plan in place, no testing has been done, no consultancy has been hired to do the testing. There are no test results in, there is no verdict on the contamination. Moving on, the other issue that I wanted to address, and I see that it's on your agenda, was I did have questions as to what had happened with the Phase 1 part of the plan to do additional testing in Riverside Park. It was my understanding that Mr. Lindeman was going to be doing some background research, and I may have missed something, but I don't know that that has been, what shall I say, vented to the public, or that that has actually come in. So I'm hoping in this discussion tonight you will address that. Thank you.
Very good. And we don't normally get into a back and forth, but before I have anybody else up, I will respond. I'm not sure what that remark was in reference to as far as the results are in, but obviously not all of the results are in, so not sure where that would have come from. And as to your question on the Phase 1 environmental assessment, that was going to be one of my questions today too, so I think we'll get to that. Anybody else want to speak? Mr. Killian? Welcome back to the world of the healthy.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm sure the regulators are as well. But Tom Killian, 133 East Thomas Street. I just want to touch briefly. I'd like to save comments perhaps for the agenda item when more information is brought up. But I did not have the opportunity to review REI's report yet. But it was in a news report today. It was stated that the report had come out and had recommended additional environmental testing in Riverside Park. That was the Wausau pilot this afternoon. And I think this issue has been a concern for some time, not just for residents. I know many of you as well on this committee have been concerned and actually have been champions of making sure that our community and environment was safe. But as things progress with this issue, if that news item about REI's recommendation is indeed accurate from the pilot, that I'd like to point out in regard to further assistance and participation from community members, that I think citizens' research and concerns in terms of credibility have now been well validated. This is now the second or third entity, a professional entity, that has expressed some concern and recommendation for additional testing. So if that turns out to be the case, then I thank you for getting us one step closer to doing the right thing, and I think this is certainly a better late than never issue. Thank you, committee.
Anybody else today? Very good. Okay, we need to consider the minutes from April 1st. Any issues, questions on the part of the committee?
I move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Is there a second? Mr. Neal, thank you. All those in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, thank you very much. Okay, we do have two guests here today to talk about the river drawdown. I know that they have been at previous meetings. One of the concerns at a meeting of a neighborhood association group that was here was that it wasn't going to be available on video, and today's report will be. And so I guess it would be Mig Zagzebski. I did get it out. If you could kick it off for us, and I appreciated what you told the neighborhood association, so if you could go along those lines, it'd be great. And the health department representative, Sarah, is here, and she can speak if members have questions or whatever.
Great, thank you, yes. I'll call on Sarah if you have any of those type of questions. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kelly Zagzebski. I work for Wisconsin Public Service. As you're aware, we are planning a drawdown for the Wisconsin River north of our Wausau hydro facility, which is just to the south of Stewart Avenue Bridge. I want to give you a little overview on the project and talk about a couple of the features as it relates. In each of your spots was a little packet of information from me, so that you've got that with you. But what's going on is we are going to be making some repairs to our Wausau hydro facility. We're going to be replacing 3 of the original gates. There's actually 7 gates there. We're replacing 3 of them. We're going to be repairing concrete piers. Those are those big sections in between the gates, and some underwater concrete work also. We're going to be installing a new gate heater. So we still operate that facility in the winter when we get chunks of ice coming through. That's one of the big safety features there. The heater is being able to heat up the gate and being able to open it and close it more efficiently and safer in the wintertime. And finally, we're going to be increasing or updating the electrical system on the facility. So there's going to be just across the gate, nothing real exciting, but there'll be a small electric house out on the dam itself. Our facility was built, this one was built in 1921. The last time that we did a major maintenance project on it was in about 1998. We're always doing maintenance. However, in 1998 was the last time we did a major drawdown such as this for this length of time. Also wanted you to be aware, Wisconsin Public Service, as you know, the utilities get regulated by different entities depending on the type of projects. So if we're going in to decrease or increase rates, if we are building a transmission line, if we are building a power plant, or updating a hydro facility, there's different regulating bodies that we have to work with. With this project, we're working directly with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, you'll hear me refer to it, and the Wisconsin DNR. So as we went through the process to get the project approved by those 2 entities, there's a long process that took about 6 months, preparing the documents and putting everything together to justify the project. One part of this project that's a major part that our residents here in our community are going to see is the drawdown to the river. So there was a lot of assessment that was done in regards to that drawdown, the length of time, how far it's going to be drawn down. So all of that was reviewed both by FERC, Wisconsin DNR, and the Army Corps of Engineers have all looked at it. One of the big questions that I'm getting, again, as I mentioned before, the drawdown is the big visual that a lot of people are going to see and have questions about. We did get a couple different opinions on how to do the project. One was including a cofferdam, and I've had a number of folks that have asked me, why aren't you going with that? Right now, they are not sure that the cofferdam would work, whereas probably you know better than I do, Gary, where the falls are located in the original hydro or the dam was. They're not sure that they can actually get a cofferdam to go in and stay. So the other thing that it would do is it would actually require us to do 4 drawdowns. This would extend our 9-month project into 2 years. So what would happen is we'd have to put in the dam, work for the summer, take out the dam, let it sit for the winter, put in the dam in the next spring, and take it back out in the next fall. So they just opted not to do it that way, especially since, from a safety perspective, is that coffer dam, because of the environmental factors, meaning the rocks and the dams that are there, able to hold it. So that was all reviewed. It is all of the information that we have submitted for the application, and other correspondence with it is all public information. It's out on FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's website. So all of that's out there. We are looking at, as you probably went by, we have our laydown area located at Clark Island, which is on the far east side of our facility. The work that we're going to be doing, and you're going to see on the flyer here, is right in the middle of the dam. So where it kind of makes that little angle, that's where, thank you, Jody, where it makes the angle right above Pat's head. There you go, over to the left. Right there, you got it, right where his hand was. That's where those three gates are located, right in the middle of it. So we're using the Clark Island area as a laydown area. If you've gone by there within Thursday, Friday, or today, you're going to see that there's 9 barges that are out in that pond, right at the reservoir right to the north. You're also going to see that there is a little tugboat there, as well as a huge crane on top of those barges. So that's starting to get that work ready. They will also be starting the drawdown. We're anticipating within the next day or two, we are going to start decreasing generation at the facility in preparation for the drawdown. The thing that you need to be aware of is with the drawdown, because of all the rain that we're getting, we could not start the drawdown when we wanted to. Originally, we had thought about around the 1st of April, then we moved it to the 15th, then it was moved to May 1st and May 6th. The reason that it keeps putting off is because of the turtles. We need to have enough dry time in between the drawdown and making sure that the turtles are able to unhibernate and lay their turtle eggs. I'm not a turtle expert. So that's one of the reasons that we're kind of holding back a little bit. So at our status meeting this morning, we're looking at sometime this week. The other thing that you're going to see this week, the underwater divers will be on site, and they're going to start prepping some of the work that they're going to need to do. The reservoir just to the north of Wausau Hydro is about 24 feet deep. We're going to be drawing it down 14 feet. The drawdown, when it starts, will go down about a foot a day, or a little bit under a foot a day. So we'll still have about 10 feet at the reservoir. It'll go up north. We're not sure to the total impact along the riverbed. We are anticipating canoeing and kayaking will be available to the north, going from Wausau Hydro up to about the WW Bridge. The area to the south, which is Lake Wausau, going towards Oak Island, towards Lake Wausau, that area should not be affected by the drawdown. The only thing that might be affected is because we're narrowing the scope of where the water's coming out, it might be just a little bit more intense within a few of the gates that maybe people aren't aware of. But the amount of water, unless we have a huge wet summer or a complete dry summer, will not be affected by this project. We are, Kayak and Canoe Corp will actually be starting some of their work. As you're aware, they're going to be upgrading their course, so they're going to be doing some test work before the drawdown gets going full blast, because they do need full amount of water going through to try their test jumps and things that they're working on. We are also working on communication, just outreach as it relates to the project. The flyer that you have in front of you is online. We also have a website. The phone number on there is my direct phone. So if people have questions, we want to make sure that they get answers. We did neighbors knock or door-to-door knock the first 3 weekends in March, making sure that the residents right along the river got the flyer. We have been talking with different media, talking with the Chamber, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the businesses located along the river, just to make sure that people are aware of the drawdown, that it's coming. The final thing that's going to be, I wanted to mention, is within your packet, there's this yellow sign poster. This actually is going to be within all of the formal boat landings from Merrill Hydro down to Wausau Hydro. It'll be posted there, so everybody, no matter where they put their boat in or where they want to start in, that they know what's going on down the river. We're working with the Parks Department and putting up signs. We're also working to ensure that the canoe portage is going to be a little bit longer than folks are used to. It's going to be short of a half a mile portage that they're going to have to walk from Barker Stewart Island all the way around, almost down to Fern Island or Oak Island there. So there's signs up so people know where they're going when they're having to portage their canoes. The other item that you need to be aware of is that the DNR has closed fishing between Wausau Hydro and the WW Bridge up in Brokaw. They just made the decision to, and there you go, you've got it, to close the fishing down for this season. The other item, one of the favorite fishing spots is supposed to be right below our powerhouse. And we're also posting no fishing there just because of all of the activity that's going to be going on the site across the dam. So that will just be closed for this year. So just a big picture overview. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, or Sarah's here too.
Questions from the committee? I have a question just on the powerhouse. That's usually people walking there just on that west bank, so that's what you don't want to happen.
Down in the fingers below the dam?
We said no fishing below the powerhouse.
Right. Going down the driveway, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes, no fishing there. Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
It'll all be posted, no fishing also.
Very good. Any questions for her?
Good.
Mr. Neal?
Thank you. I noticed on the sign where it says foot and vehicle traffic's not allowed on exposed flowage bed. We have just talked here a little bit about the potential for some kind of cleanup while the drawdown is taking place. And as we were mentioning earlier, we know we can't pull things out of the muck or whatever. But there's no telling what might be found lying there on the surface. And also there's the question of wanting to maybe chop off some of the deadheads and whatnot for safer navigation. And I'm thinking, this would be in an official capacity. The city would maybe doing this in one form or another. So what does the city have to do, with the DNR or whatever, to make sure, that they can trot off onto the surface of the
Sure.
flowage?
So, sure, in relationship to any of the cleanup or any work, what we're telling residents and anybody that asks, that they need to make sure that they work directly with the DNR and make sure they don't accidentally break a law or do something, but contact the DNR directly, and I can get Jody that number to put in your minutes for you, and making sure that anything that folks want to do, that they're able to do it and it's correct with the DNR. Because, we're expecting some things, lots of cleanups. People are going to be looking at their shoreline, seeing what else maybe could be done to improve their property.
Mr. Nutting, did you have your hand up? Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Well, hang on just a minute. Can we have Sarah address the issue of blastomycosis? That was a question that came up at the earlier meeting, and I think it's relevant to ours today, too.
Okay, at the neighborhood meeting, we kind of presented, there were a lot of questions about blastomycosis and just people concerned about their exposure to it. There is no valid testing. People are talking about actually having their areas tested, and there really is no valid testing that can be performed to detect blastomycosis. But we don't anticipate that it's going to be any higher of a risk. It actually even may be a lower of a risk this year along those riverbeds, just because generally with blastomycosis, you have the fluctuation of the water that actually it gets wet and then dry and then wet and dry. That fluctuation is what creates that environment for it to grow. And since if they draw it down, there's not going to be that fluctuation existing. We can't say positively that it'll be lower, but we don't expect it to be any higher than what it normally would be for blastomycosis.
Are there areas someone should avoid particularly?
It generally goes along the shorelines where that water level fluctuates is where they generally find the blastomycosis, along with dead and decaying organic matter like wood or leaves is generally where they find it.
Very good. Committee questions? Very good. Thank you. Questions from the audience? I think when we're done, I think Jamie can talk briefly about what the department expects to be able to do during this
Joyce
period.
Ludke, 714 Birch Street. Your comment about turtles was really picked up my ears because I have a grandson who loves wildlife. And so can you just explain, like, what did you do with the turtles that were in the...
The question has to do with turtles. Actually, what I'm going to do is kind of answer it a little bit differently. We did not do anything with the turtles. We cannot do anything with the turtles. That's why we're having to hold off. But any of the stranded fish, any of the stranded species in the river, we will need to relocate those. We have a third-party environmental services company that is daily checking all of the environmental requirements that we have to do, including making sure that the area is black so that nobody gets into where the turtles are located, and checking that every day. So, and making sure anything, if it gets stranded, that it's relocated correctly.
And so the turtles will stay there then?
Yes, the turtles will stay where they are until they're done laying their eggs, and then nature will go.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
And one of the things the DNR rep said that this consultant is actually going to try to rescue stranded mussels as well as fish. So I think they're doing a pretty thorough job in really trying to make sure that this doesn't damage the wildlife population along that stretch. Any other questions? We can roll on. Perhaps Ms. Polly could talk about the department's aspirations as far as navigational hazards or...
Sure, thank you. As Mr. Neal said, we do have a plan to work with the DNR to clean up some of the riverbank, getting out debris that we might find, any car parts or anything like that we might find, bicycles. We also will try to, where we have some hang-up areas of, around our bridges, try to work on alleviating that in the future, and whatever we can do, we'll work with the DNR very closely. The other thing we'll be doing is some updates and some repairs to our boat landings. We're currently already working on the piers at Schofield Park. There's a little bit of work that has to be done at Gilbert Park as well. So we'll be reviewing those while the water is low and doing the repairs there that we need to as well.
Anything else? Very good. I appreciate your time and good information. I think we can move on to item 5, discussion of possible action regarding collaborating with the DNR and Wausau on potential additional soil testing in Riverside Park. I think there's a number of things we can talk about with this, but the committee has seen kind of the basis for the message that we want to convey to Wausau. Do you have questions, comments?
I do, I guess just maybe get the ball rolling a little bit. We know that some study was being done looking at prevailing winds, the height of the stack where the burning of the treated wood took place. Where are we at in terms of seeing the results of that study, which might show us, the wedge of, coverage that we're probably looking at, and where they're seeing perhaps potential deposit concerns?
Perhaps Mr. Lindman, who graced us with his presence today, could fill us in on that. And if you could also talk while you're up, Eric, as far as the REI report and what's up with that, because I was wondering this afternoon actually when we were going to hear if I guess I'd like a recommendation on whether the soil testing along the lines of what Wausau is going to be required to do in the first few inches of soil is seen as sufficient, or if we should go to other depths as well.
Well, I guess we had a conversation about a week, maybe a week and a half ago with the DNR related to the Wausau, the air deposition of burning contaminants and doing that modeling. That was supposed to be in on the 14th or the 17th into the DNR. They anticipated doing a review on that, 2 to 4 weeks with some back and forth with Wausau. At that point, Matt Thompson had stated that once they determine kind of that area of potential effect, then they would be able to discuss any potential testing that may be done. I don't have a lot more details than that, other than Matt did say that he would, once they have a chance to review that and release that, they would provide a copy to the city as well, that we could take a look at that. With regards to the phase one, we had a call last week with Ken Lassa with REI with the phase one. He anticipates being done with that sometime later May. He's finalizing that, and he's looking up, and he's been in communications with the DNR as well on what types of additional testing and stuff and what he's found in compiling that data. When I had talked with Ken, he felt like it would be ready for Park and Rec or any other committee, in June, to have that report available. I asked him to have it available a couple weeks before the meeting, so it's going to be a very, pretty healthy report, so I wanted to make sure people had time before the meeting to review it, so I think. So right now, as far as what additional testing is going to be required, I don't know. Ken had said that with the spill on the 3M site, he was going to do some additional investigation there to try to get some more details on what exactly was cleaned up, the depth of potentially what could be there, and then he would make his recommendations on any deeper testing based on that. When I talked to Matt Thompson about additional testing, they're really going to be focused on that top 2 inches of soil, basically within the roots of the organics, and so he thinks that their greatest depth at this point would probably be maybe 3 inches, if that. So.
Very good. Any other questions for our Director of Public Works?
Well, I imagine at some point in the future, we're looking at river walk extensions or improvements or that sort of thing, and that sort of thing is going to require more than a couple inches worth of digging to lay it out before pouring or whatever. So certainly, I guess any of those possibly affected areas would have to be tested to a sufficient depth, right?
Yeah, I would think that the DNR will start, with their window of testing, kind of the area of potential effect, and then determine where the best locations for testing would be. I would assume that the city then would weigh in a little bit on that, on what would happen if, and depending on how many samples they require, what frequency, in what locations. There might be areas that may have more dense testing than others, I'm not exactly sure how they're going to determine that. So I think that those are some of the things that are still up in the air. As far as the river walk, like from Thomas Street over to Riverside Park, that connection, so we're looking at that right now as far as the design, because that wall that's along the river is failing, and so it's in pretty poor shape, but, you know, some of those costs that have come back very high, and so right now we're looking at potentially some different options with the structural engineers. We had done some borings in the river as well as over in that area, but just to check soils, check for groundwater levels, those types of things. There wasn't any environmental testing done with that.
Mr. Nutting?
Thank you, Chair. Eric, thank you. Would you remind us of the procedures and precautions we took on the east side in the brownfields area for preparing that area for the walking trail? I know that is a previous industrial area that had contamination, but how did we take care of that procedurally during the years that we were prepping for that trail extension?
Yeah, some of that was done before me, but basically we categorized it as a brownfield site, and so we were eligible for EPA funding for cleanup on that. So, you know, different areas were identified with different types of contaminants. There were hot spots that had, and then working with the DNR, they let us know what areas we had to actually mitigate or remove. Other areas could just be capped, which is pretty much, where we're at right now. So all of the real hot spots have been removed and backfilled with clean fill, but there is still contamination on the riverfront, and so they just determined that capping, you know, is adequate for the testing results that we had for some of those areas.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Gisselman?
Eric, just a little bit of a timeline as we go forward. So the DNR issues sort of match or parallel the phase one REI, or how do we go forward?
Well,
I can understand the REI and reporting back to us in June. Is the DNR sort of going with this, or are they separate, or how do they work together on that?
We'll share the phase one. I mean, lots of parts of the phase one Ken has already shared with the DNR. You know, he's had some conversations with them, but once that report is finalized, at the same time where, you know, it's available to us, we'll share it with the DNR as well, so they have a chance to take a look at some of those conclusions and the information.
So are they in a position to act on some of that with regard to testing, or is that pretty much just a report back to, is the RRI report just pretty much a report back to us?
Well, it is a report back to you, but it will have some recommendations. And so, you know, so then it'll be determined, like, you know, with some conversations with Ken and REI, and then also with the DNR, you know, what are they proposing to do? Is there a way that, you know, we could match up with any testing that they're proposing in Wausau, that maybe we could do them all at the same time? You know, if they're in the same areas. If they're not, then, you know, maybe it's not as much of a concern, but.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think one of our concerns was that we just didn't want to be thinking about additional testing and then all of a sudden find out that Wausau testing was already underway or something, so.
I don't think so. I mean, just when I look at the timelines and the weeks the DNR was talking about, I would say late June, maybe into July for the testing, by the time that, you know, that determination is made. So I think pushing to get the phase one done and everything as soon as we can, so we know where the city's at and what that information is. We can share that with the DNR, and you know, and that can be part of their discussions with Wausau as well.
Okay. Have you received anything from REI yet with an opinion as to whether there should be additional testing there?
No, only what Ken has provided. I mean, we've had a couple brief conversations with Ken, really just where he's at with the study and timelines and when we can expect that to be completed. But when he came to, I believe it was the Park and Rec Committee previously, that's the information, I mean, any formal information, that's what we have so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you. The testing that we do now will determine the level of pollution or contaminants at this point in time, right?
Yeah, so, correct.
All right, so are we sure that the pollution has, the migration has stopped? Or if we do testing 5 years from now and find out that it's worse than it was when we tested today, what are we going to do about that?
Well, I think the idea of the testing, how they're going to lay it out, and typically this what happens is they'll look at the areas of potential effect and try to determine where the most, the areas that could potentially be most affected by whatever happened in the past, right? And then what they'll do is they'll test that area, but they'll also test beyond that area, because ultimately what they want to find is limits. And so what we ran into on the riverfront too is that we tested along the riverfront, and the further we tested out, we still found contaminants. And so what the DNR wanted is additional rounds of testing even further out to try to determine where that extent was. And I would assume that this will be the same situation.
Okay, but like what I'm concerned about is if we identify where the pollution is coming from, these tests identify what it is and where it's coming from, how can we keep it from continuing?
Right, depending on what it is, that's something that I would have to rely on the DNR and the experts for. Different contaminants spread in different ways, and so depending on what is found, whether it's dioxins or VOCs or whatever we find in those soils, then there'll be recommendations as far as what we need to do. Does it need to be removed? Does it need to be capped? Does it, so.
Will we be able to identify, and I assume then we'll be able to identify where it's coming from. It's either coming from, up above 3M, or it's coming from, some of it appears naturally in the soil, but
Right.
other stuff is leaching down from the Wausau test wells, in that spot.
Right, and there may be more than one round of testing. You're right. I mean, depending on the contaminants, they can probably, do the best they can to link it back to something,
Yeah.
Which is why I think that they've required this air modeling be done. But, like I said, if they come up and they find some sort of contaminants in the soils, then there may be another round of testing, not only to confirm them, but again, trying to find the extent of it, or, maybe narrow it down to where the origin came from.
All right.
That could be another option.
Thank you.
Isn't it correct, Eric, that the testing that Wausau is going to be doing is to determine the aerial deposition, whatever flew through the air from the smokestack where they were burning the treated lumber that stopped decades ago?
Yeah, so the particulates that would have been, emitted into the air would have fallen somewhere from
Okay,
all of that
so
burning.
that's over with, and they're not continually being deposited. We don't have more coming.
Right, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
They're trying to predict where those would have landed, when that burning was going on.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Killian? Thank you, Eric.
Good evening. I just have a few kind of comment questions based on some of the discussion here, and I'll preface this with I am very much a layman, and I can only regurgitate what I've read from the experts, but I don't have most of those documents with me. Mr. Neal had asked about the depths of petroleum contamination from 3M at Riverside Park, and 3M's consultants have that area of residual contamination at about 7 feet below ground surface. That's, I believe, what their consultant put it at. Now, what you'll find, perhaps even on GIS photos, are some historical aerial photos which may show some surficial runoff from the western industrial properties into the park. Now, some of these photos are rather recent in terms of, say, last 20 years. Others are much older, but I think what we may find, and I think we've got to do some some real careful differentiation here based on what the expert reports do say is that if we look hard enough, we've got quite a bit of visual data from historical photos. So that's a very positive thing. But I spoke with Mr. Thompson at the DNR just several hours ago, and I was surprised to find out that this aerial deposition study done by Walico's consultants, TRC, that at this point, it sounds likely it may just be for dioxins and furans. Hey, better than nothing, right? But if they were burning hundreds of tons of pounds a month, which included processed residue and, as they said, miscellaneous waste and rubbish because it wasn't fit for a landfill, then perhaps we should expand that scope at this time because, look, I mean, citizens are frustrated. I'm sure several of you are. How often have we all been talking about this? And, to say, I'm sure the people at the DNR do and have done their best, and I thank them for their service. But if we had just relied on the DNR, we would not be having this discussion today. This was citizen-driven. So I would not limit valid information coming from the community. So if they're just testing for dioxin, yes, a shallow depth does make a lot of sense from burning, but I think what we'll want to look at, they may use background values, and we should look at that very carefully. So please look at the USGS background soil survey study they did of Wisconsin for arsenic and lead. Now, as these studies are done, this is the opportunity we have to get some actual accurate background value levels for heavy metals. And you know what the good news is? A dioxin soil test runs about $700 at Pace Labs, and a heavy metal test per metal runs about $10. So if they can take the time and effort after all these decades to do some dioxin tests, ask Walico to chip in another couple $100, and let's get some heavy metal tests too, right? Because I think the city of Wausau and the people of Wausau, this wasn't your problem and it wasn't our problem. We didn't create it. Have them shell out a few $100, and let's get some heavy metal tests too. Make sure they're not above background level. Okay, and then in Riverside Park, it's apples to oranges. You may have VOCs and petroleum-related contaminants. Using the Walico aerial deposition study will not indicate to you what's happening in the park. They're really apples and oranges from a layman's perspective. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. We are running low on time. I think we've not perhaps exhausted the possibility of topics here, but I think our department head has a handle on what needs to happen here in terms of contacting Walico and making sure that they know that we want to piggyback on their testing. And we've got the REI study coming in, which hopefully will advise us as to additional testing at different depths. So if I could have a motion to direct staff to make that contact with Walico and arrange that, I think that's what we need to do today. Mr. Nutting and Mr. Neal. Any comments, suggestions?
Well, as part and parcel of that, I'd like to consider adding to it concerns raised by Mr. Killian in terms of testing. I'd like to have a good handle on what is being tested for, based on historical data. Are we going in with like blinders, or going to take a little bit wider view if possible?
Would you like the department head's contact to include broaching the subject of testing for additional, like heavy metals and other substances? Is that okay with the maker of the motion? So we have a motion to have Jamie Polly contact Walico and make sure that they are aware. I think they already kind of know, but formally notify them that we would like to have the option of piggybacking on the testing that they're doing, and we also want them to consider testing for additional substances that may be of concern. Mr. Gissel.
So what exactly are we asking Walico to do? I mean, it seems we're piggyback, or don't they already have some charge to do some testing, and the city now is going to be asking them to do more?
They have a charge to do some testing. They're going to come back and they're going to say, okay, here's the area where we're going to do the testing. And we're going to look at that, and we may say, hey, what about up in the park? We want that. And so Walico would say, okay, that can happen, and it'll cost you an additional $2,500 or whatever. But we want to establish that relationship with them so that it all happens at the same time. It's all comparable, and
How does this depend on the REI suggestions than the DN? I mean, what are we asking them to go beyond? We have to see what they're going to be doing first before
Yeah.
we can tell them what.
yeah, I think step one is just to make the contact with them and have them understand that we want to, perhaps conduct simultaneous tests adjacent to the ones they want to do.
So that when the REI report comes in, we want Walico here to tell them exactly what we want to have them done?
Well, I don't know
have
if we
them
need
do?
them in the room, but I think we're going to be able
Well-
to fine-tune, I think we should expect to be able to fine-tune our request for testing based on what we get from REI. This is just, hey, when you do this, we're going to want to be.
Because isn't Walico really responsible for doing all of the testing? Is the city now responsible for doing more testing beyond what Walico's being charged to do?
We're expecting, if you want to chime in, you can, but we're expecting that the DNR is going to require them to do within the pattern that they've identified that's, most likely based on their air movement studies and all that other stuff that they're doing. Here's the area that's, Walico will tell the DNR, here's the area that we think is most likely to have this material deposited. And then the DNR will, perhaps there's going to be some back and forth there, but it's likely, based on the direction the wind flows, that that's not going to get us much of Riverside Park. And we want to make
We
sure
want
that
more.
that happens. We think we do, yeah.
Well, we do, but of course.
Very good.
Also, just to add, when speaking with other city staff on this, before we can move forward in doing testing, we'll have to bring it back to committee and to the council, because additional funding will have to be identified as to, what the cost of that additional testing will be. So right now, it is just to reach out to them, just to say that we're following their movements, and that we're also going to be looking at our results from the phase one. We'll be talking with the DNR, and then hopefully move forward together so that our timeline adds up, so that they're not going to do testing and we're falling behind. So we'll stick with them on that schedule. But before we actually do any testing, it will need to come back to.
We're all good? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And we can move on. We have all of 8 minutes. We should be able to do just fine. Educational items. Jamie, you want to MC this part?
Sure. I'll turn the first item over to Mr. Neal. If you want to give a brief update, we do have a meeting right after this for the Dog Park Committee. But
Sure, yeah, the 5:30 is the nominal beginning, or at least at the very ending of this meeting, we will start the next one. In that meeting tonight, we're going to be very logistical in terms of division of some responsibilities and whatnot. Recently, we have come upon a promising development related to overflow parking, which would be located at the northwest corner of the park area, what is
Southwest.
called Plummer Street. And that would be very, very handy and a welcome addition. So we're not just relying on the parking right off of 4th Street itself. So that's a good thing. We had a productive meeting at the Community Foundation this week, just to get a lot of insight into how we can pull together a strong funding program. We'll be sharing that with committee members tonight too, and I guess with some marching orders attached to that. And other than that, I'm looking forward to seeing what maybe has come up with in terms of other fence opportunities and just things like that. So anybody that'd like to hang around for that meeting is welcome. It's in the Birch Room next door.
Okay, moving on to some program and project updates. These are in your packet as well, but we just highlighted a few of the programs that we're working on. Working with the Wausau Wolfpack Lacrosse organization is new to us more this year. We've worked them a little bit in the past, but this year they've lost some fields that they were using at North Central Healthcare, so we have worked them into Airport Sports Park. We have now taken on the new reservation policy for the 400 block, where they come to us first and then they come back to the city for the special use permit. It's going really well. We do have our first event, or big event there on the 17th with the Pizza with Police fundraiser happening. You've heard it on the radio. And then our bike polo group is utilizing Riverside Park once again, and we just included this because they are using it full swing, but they did have some questions before. This year is the first year that they've used it and they've signed a use agreement with the city. It was in the past just helping them get established, finding them a spot. Now that they're an organized group, they're being treated like all of the rest of our organized groups and have a use agreement for our facilities that helps with maintenance as well as liability, and they are an organized group, so they should have the same expectations. But before they signed their agreement, they did have some questions about soil testing, so we did include in your packet our response to them that with the help of Mr. Peckham, we were able to give them, and they signed the agreement. They were there all weekend, so we're up and running. For our project update, we do have just an update on a canopy at Kickbush Plaza, and we do have representatives from the Downtown River District if you have any questions on it. When I looked back at the minutes from when the stage was put in, it was more of a, because it was fundraised, it was put in as an informational item as well to the Parks Committee. It was discussed at that time as well in 2017 that it would have a canopy at some point. Now it will. They're moving forward with it. So the design was discussed. We gave you a idea of what it would look like. And Blake can answer any questions that you might have regarding that, but they do plan on installing the canopy in July. They've met with our staff about how it will work coming up and down. We're on board with that. So if there's any questions, we can provide that. And then the rest of the updates are pretty general maintenance updates. We are in full swing getting ready for spring sports events, use of our parks, playgrounds, shelters, tree removals, tree maintenance, busy. So.
I just had a question about the stage, the illustration up there. I mean, it shows like a solid kind of stage structure at the bottom. That's just
that's
artistic license?
Yeah, the stage
Okay.
is not changing.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just the canopy.
All right.
I'm wondering if the posts that support the canopy are removed seasonally?
Correct.
Blake is shaking his head.
So Blake Opalahusky, Executive Director for the Wausau River District. Yes, the posts will be also removed every spring, and then in the fall they'll be taken down for snow removal.
You just have holes that they slide into, or?
You know what? I'll actually bring Rob up for that.
Very good. We got the expert.
Hi, Rob Erickson with Wausau Canvas. We'll have a permanently anchored post and concrete in the ground, and on that will be, if you're familiar with the flanges that are used on signposts, parking lot lights, that type of thing, we'll have a large flange. It'll be bolted through. We'll have that structure just below grade. The posts will have a mating flange, so when they're put up, they can be bolted to the base that's in the ground. So that'll maintain the strength all the way through to the bottom. So then when they're removed, we'll have a plate that will go over that for the winter and be attached to the same position, which will seal it off so they can plow over it, walk over it, whatever we want.
Excellent. Any questions about the canopy or solid colors? A nice plaid, perhaps?
To to reflect my jacket. We definitely want to tie this canopy into the work that's being done in the River Life development, so using kind of the similar colors as well to extend that theme all the way down the River Walk.
Very good. More power to you.
Wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee on anything that Ms. Polly has so briskly taken us through this afternoon? Mr. Nutting.
I don't know if you talked about this. I'm looking on the next page, agenda summary. Water systems, primarily restrooms. I'm questioning as to why the public restroom is not unlocked and functional where the River's Edge Park is along where the farmer's market. The building was not accessible by the general public this past weekend. Let's get it unlocked and usable.
Yeah, they have been in the process of doing river cleanup from the flood and getting our water systems back up and all online. So they may have not gotten to that yet. I will check, but it should be very soon that all of them will be up and running.
But for sure, that one should be functional before the next weekend.
Yeah, if you get farmer's market, you gotta have a bathroom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It may be already functional, it may just not have been unlocked. I'll double check.
Very good. Anything else?
Thank you.
Future agenda items, I think we know one thing is going to be back with this testing and progress there. Mr. Neal?
Thank you. Now that the weather is turning around and we're looking at spring and summer, I'd be interested in the Stewart Park pillar Phase 2 plans, and we did talk. Now we're talking about the 2 pillars on the east side of 10th Street, and the discussion was whether or not they would stay at the curb or be pushed back like the 2 on the west side have been, which I hope they can be.
Yep.
Just that whole, the timetable, plans and whatnot. We also have the finial that we need to have put up on the one pillar that was, finished but doesn't have a top on it.
Yeah.
But, and also, there was the chipped kind of, the cap around, one or the other of those pillars too. Will need to be repaired at some point somehow, creatively. But just an overall on that project.
Yep, we can provide an update.
Very good. If you have anything between now and then, let Jamie know or me know, and we'll see about getting it on the agenda. I could use a motion to adjourn, and yes, sir.
The issue of the grand opening at River Life Park, number 7, future agenda items, is that date set, or how are we doing on any anticipated plan when that park will be complete?
Yes, that's why it's on for future agenda items. I plan to have it on your June meeting agenda to discuss and set the date. For that, we will have a better idea by then, too, as to where the progress is. They right now have a substantial completion date by June 4th and a final completion by June 14th. And so our idea was that we would have a grand opening early July, but they have just started progress back on the park, so we are having weekly meetings starting this week with the contractor. We know when the port and place surfacing is coming in at the end of May, so our June meeting should be a good time frame for us to determine when that grand opening can be. But we don't want to set it too early without knowing what our progress is. But that's why it's on for our June meeting.
Gary wants to book a band. Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? Mr. Neal, what a team. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
I think that's clear. Thank you very much. Close.
Yep, good job.
52 minutes.